Hey everyone, this is a quick call out to listeners in the Los Angeles area. Coming up on Thursday, March 5th, will be the 4th annual Tonebenders Los Angeles Sound Design Meetup, presented by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. Starting at 7 p.m., this is a totally free gathering of people working in sound for films, games, and series to hang out and share some stories and a lot of laughs. No need to RSVP, just come out and catch up with old friends and colleagues and hopefully make a bunch of new friends as well. Last year, we outgrew the venue that we had been using, so this year we will be at a new location that should give us a lot more elbow room. So let's all head over to All Season Brewing at 800 South La Brea Avenue. If you can come, please seek me out and make sure you say hi. I want to meet as many people from the LA sound community that night as I can. Please feel free to spread the word to anyone you think would be a good fit. Although the title says Sound Design Meetup, this is also a night for mixers, Foley teams, supervisors, assistants, stage techs, composers. You get the idea. So that's Thursday, March 5th, 7 p.m. at All Season Brewing. I hope to see you all there. You're listening to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. If you work in sound design, post, or game audio, you already know how much time the right library can save you. For the month of February, get 50% off any Sound Ideas membership tier, no matter which level of access you need. That's half off of the entire professionally recorded sound effects catalog, from cinematic and broadcast to hard-to-find specialty sounds. Just head to sound-ideas.com and use the promo code TONEBENDERS50 at checkout. Hello and welcome to Tonebenders. My name is Tim Muirhead and I am excited to talk about audio posts for animation today with some of the sound crew from the recent critical and box office smash, Zootopia 2. The story tells an important lesson for children and adults alike and never feels like it's anything short of just a simple, fun, and exciting adventure. Any listeners that have not seen it yet, give it a shot with some of the kids in your life, and I promise you, you will all have a great time. Zootopia has recently been nominated for Best Sound Editing for an animated feature at the MPSC Golden Reels. It's been nominated at the Cinema Audio Society for Best Animated Feature, Best Sound Mixing. And the film as a whole has been nominated for an Oscar for the Best Animated Feature. So the film has been warmly embraced this awards season. Joining me today from the team are David Fleur and Jeremy Boker. First, let's meet David Fleur, Zootopia's supervising recording mixer. It's wonderful to meet you today, David.
Well, hey, Tim, how are you? And it's a pleasure to be here. Really thrilled to talk about the movie. It's got everything in it.
It does. That's going to lead into my first question. But first, let's meet Jeremy. Jeremy Boker was the sound designer and supervising sound editor on Zootopia 2. Jeremy was last on Tonebenders to talk about Elio back in episode 329. Welcome back to Tonebenders, Jeremy.
Hey, Tim, it's good to see you again.
You kind of led into my first question, David. This is an animated film, but it's also kind of a buddy cop film. Younger kids that watch it won't get kind of the idea that it's almost like a Beverly Hills Cop at times. It's also a horror film at times when they're up in the cabin on top of the mountain. It's also a James Bond-esque film when they're at the party about a third of the way through the film. You're jumping genres constantly. How do you do that in a way with sound that both makes you reference all these different types of films, but also make the film feel like it's a one piece of art? Jeremy, maybe do you want to talk about that first?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of our collective favorite things about animation is it oscillates in between real world, super exaggerated world, and different genres. And different genres are either explored for emotional reasons or comedic reasons because we're imitating genres that we know so well. So in a way, we kind of get to flex all of our muscles as far as different types of film, which is just a blast. And thank goodness we have people like David and Gabe to guide us through that.
Jeremy, I think this was an amazing team, and I know that's kind of a colloquial thing to say, but it really was necessary on this one because we were up against it. And I think, Tim, your question is a really good one because it comes down to the writing and the directing. We embraced It's kind of basic, but we pay attention to what the story needs. The comedy in the film is sometimes very adult, as you kind of mentioned, goes maybe over kids' heads. And there's a lot in there and all these great locations and actually nods to films throughout the whole film, classic films that if you're watching and paying attention, maybe the third or eighth time through, you would be able to really get a lot of the inside stuff that's going on too. But it all threads into the story, especially once you get music in there. It complicates things a little bit in terms of the decision making and how we're going to play things. But, everybody played extremely well in the sandbox and we were able to make quality choices. And fortunately, also working with a really good composer, Mr. Cicchino, who understood sound design, dialogue, comedy, drama, and all of those things really helped us along the way.
That's an interesting idea because some of the scenes in this film, the music is huge, really big. And I'm wondering if maybe we can dig into one. We're going to dig into a few scenes, but one scene for that I noticed, I was shocked at how well it turned out, is the scene where they're sliding through the water tubes. The music is huge. And then the sounds in the water tubes are these water whooshes that are kind of not delicate by any means, but they don't have the snap to them that a lot of times you need for a sound effect to cut through huge music. I just wondered if we could talk through how you approach that scene. It turned out really well, but I can imagine you having to really pull your hair out to figure out how to make it work so well.
To be honest with you, we had several cracks at the movie in terms of early attempts. I mean, that's one of the advantages of being in-house as we are, which is a little bit different in that I've seen screenings of this from screening 1 to screening 8 before we even took it to an audience. And Jeremy also was on early so that we could start thinking about these things early.
Yeah.
And I could, walk down the hall and sit with picture editorial and go, this is a cool sound moment that'll help the story. And what if this, what if that? Real collaboration with everybody up the line very early on. And that scene in particular, we knew early on what the thread of the music was going to be like. It's a matter of fashioning. And basically my approach is I'll go through a scene and I'll get the dialogue squared away. And then I'll do a music pass. This is generally speaking, just as a starting spot. You get the music squared away, which, we sort of know by then because we've rehearsed it enough that we know what we think is going to be featured. I mean, this is really our pass at it so that we can present to the directors maybe something new also along the way. And then, an effects pass that they've spent a significant amount of time building and pre-dubbing. And then we go together and we nip and tuck and sometimes take things out completely, remove music or remove backgrounds or sound effects and make those decisions so that we get clarity and get the fun, get the fun back.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad that you asked about specifically that scene. I think
it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's one of the scenes that we're incredibly proud of. One of the things that was interesting as we first saw that scene was to think, how do we want water to sound? Quite often water in the cinematic world is done in a very non-literal way, which we're all comfortable with and happy with. Obviously, in real life, you hear a ton of extreme high-end underwater, but that's never what we want to hear. Within that kind of idea, I started to experiment with, well, what if it was kind of only a certain part of the spectrum? And would that then give, a certain clarity to other things, whether, if they're underwater, so it's less dialogue, but especially, the music that David so beautifully mixed, the theme in there, which is the theme for our snake friend, has a lot of flute in it. So you have a lot of high end there and a lot of air there. So it was actually great to kind of restrict ourselves to a certain sandbox on the effects side and work with the lows and the mids and how can we get comedy and power out of that and also get a real sense of Dopplers while leaving that extra room for clarity. I think quite often in a lot of scenes, especially because, Cicchino created such a beautiful score across the board, we as a sound effects team were asking ourselves, are there places where we can take out air here and there? Because otherwise, it can kind of eat into that beautiful reverb that either David's creating or is inherent in the scoring stage. And that was just kind of a fun, exaggerated opportunity to keep the energy up and also to really play the music up.
we had a lot of discussions about this. This isn't like get on the stage, see something for the first time and go,
Right.
There's a lot of pre-planning that we fortunately have the ability to do, which makes this part more fun.
Yeah.
But also, working in Atmos, you mentioned the flute. So I got I think 23 stems or so from Michael Cicchino and Steve Davis, the music editor. We planned that out in advance in terms of, yes, it's a live orchestra, but I've got, all the perk and the synths and the flute and the specific things, choir, a lot of guitars separated so I could not have to share the same real estate all the time with what's on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And by pulling things off, like the flute in Atmos is constantly overhead, draped overhead a little bit towards the front. So every time Gary's on, it's this recognizable vibe. You don't want the audience to go, oh, what's up there? It's a feel that was a signature that we used throughout as a character signature and also paid off really well then because by not having to have every stem playing at 100%, I could maybe keep the percussion going and pull some of the steady stuff back so we could get some of the whooshes. And, we definitely did a push and pull on all of that. It takes a little bit of time to get there. And then, of course, you get impressions from people that give us notes. And we hope we're close, which fortunately, I think we were pretty close in that one.
It worked out.
Others maybe not so much, but that's dubbing for you.
When watching it, I've worked on a lot of scenes, not necessarily in tubes, but underwater chases. And giving it motion and energy is really difficult.
Yeah.
And between the music and the sound effects in that scene, it had that energy and that motion, and I was really impressed. It's something that I aspire to get to one day. It made me really happy.
Oh, that's great to hear. You just made us happy.
Exactly. That is a pivotal scene. It's the climax of several scenes in front of it that are also big. And so when we're looking at the big picture, like the whole chase through the Marsh Market and what we've come out of in the Lizard Lounge, which is its own shape, but getting through that big chase there required making sure we have an arc with rises and falls. Our audience, we're not going to kill them with bullets coming through the screen and stuff. We have to be mindful of our audience. And so giving it a shape that then when we get to the end and they spill out on the ground, it's like a breath of like, oh, wow. And we can lean in a little bit, So those are the choices we made editorially and mix-wise.
David, on IMDb, you're listed as a supervising re-recording mixer on this film.
Mm-hmm.
What does supervising re-recording mixer mean?
It means that I'm responsible for supervising the comedy and the puns that are on the stage. That's about it.
This is a whole thing, Tim. We have a jar that money goes into.
Yeah, there's a pun jar. Every time I say a bad dad joke, I have to put $1 in. Every time anybody else laughs. And it all goes to Make-A-Wish at the end. It's a stage thing for us. I mean, it essentially just means that, it's a responsibility. When something goes wrong, all the heads spin around and look at you. It's like, okay. But it's a very gracious title. I've been doing every Disney animated film since 2004. And so when I came on full-time at Disney Animation, Berenice Robinson, our VP, head of post,
Yay.
she's the one who makes all this stuff happen. She's post-producer. It was a treat to kind of get that, but we all have an equal voice, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And we work, Gabe Guy, who is my mixing partner, who also records most of our dialogue in our films, along with Jeremy Olson, who recorded some for us in-house or all over the world as our actors go. I've known Gabe since I met him at Skywalker in 2000. You get that unspoken language. It's very much an open floor. I do like to sit and do a lot of planning in advance, and then we collaborate on that.
David's definitely being very humble. I mean, the truth is we all are allowed to have voices, and it's a beautiful collaborative environment. But so much of what David does sets the amazing tone and drive of the mix stage, and he offers so much as far as aesthetic and leadership, and also just in a lot of these moments, music is the driving force, and how that music bobs and weaves around everything is set by him. So, and I know he'll never say that out loud, so I figured I needed to
No,
say
but
it.
you don't have to contribute to the pun jar now for a little while. I'll give you a little reprieve. But the other thing that is kind of important here that leads into a big picture of what we do is the worldwide reach of these films, which,
Right.
if you know, Zootopia has a very wide reach around the world and was, people loved the first one and the second one. And part of my responsibility is to help out and oversee the 48 language versions that
Oh,
are
wow.
done with the movie. I go over to the UK where there's a central dubbing facility at Shepperton because Europe can come easily there. And I barely know English, so I don't really supervise the languages, but I am surrounded by very smart, capable people and directors from each territory. So there are very important things to consider when you're building this thing from a dialogue standpoint, because we had 85 characters in the film. That's a lot, plus loop group. We had production dialogue, we had ADR and loop group, and lots of futzes and perspectives. So all of that automation that went into building that, and also thanks to Brad Semenoff, our dialogue supervisor, who one of the best I've ever worked with, and another collaborator from Skywalker on Jeremy's team, we build our sessions so that I give that session without the media to be put into a template overseas. And then that creates a whole nother workflow of all the languages going through the same treatments, the same panning, the same reverbs. That's another part of my role, I guess, as supervising re-recording mixer to kind of help out with, and very grateful to do that. But our domestic has to be pretty tight before we go there. So
Zootopia 2, if I'm correct, was the second biggest film last year in terms of international box office. So this gets eyeballs, well, ears on it. Let's say it get lots of ears on it. It's very impressive, the reach that these films have.
that's right. It's a big responsibility, the way we see it, because, nothing's better than a family or somebody saying, that movie stuck with me since my childhood for these reasons, and I mean, almost everybody has a story like that. That's what I mean about the responsibility. It's a big deal, at least to us.
For sure.
Just the fact that you're able to carry across the intent and continuity of what was done on our side of the pond. And, like you mentioned, there's such a large, piece of the pie that goes out to the rest of the world outside of the US, and the fact that you're able to bridge that and kind of
bigger, actually.
Bigger to get across the same intent that we're familiar with over here is just so great and so important.
That's the idea, is to protect the director's intent. I'm just there to kind of help with the mixes, not the translations. That's a whole nother discussion.
Right.
Because wordplay, these movies are full of wordplay,
yes,
as you know, which doesn't always work in French or German or Italian. They have to kind of customize it. And that's a whole separate podcast, which is interesting. That's the idea. And they support us doing this, which is
amazing.
If you are a regular listener to Tonebenders, you've heard me mention the O-Mini miniature omnidirectional microphones from Chris Trevino. I've talked about how I love the neutral frequency response and how they are ultrasonic capable, allowing me to really bend and shape and have a lot of fun with my recordings in post-production. Each pair of mics is handmade by Chris Trevino, a practicing field recordist and a really engaged member of the sound community. He uses high-quality components and puts a lot of work into making and testing each mic to ensure they live up to his own high standards. The O-Minis are available in both XLR and 1/8-inch versions to accommodate any kind of recorder you might have. Between their compact form and robust build quality, they work great with a variety of workflows, from everyday carry recording kits to expeditions where every gram counts and you want to keep your pack weight light. Maybe my favorite thing about both versions of the O-Minis is the price. They are extremely affordable, at $130 American for the plug-in power stereo pairs and $150 for XLR pairs. They offer a lot of value. I suggest you give them a try. At this price point, it is a no-brainer. To learn more, head to chrisatrevino.com/store or click on the link in the description of this episode in your podcast app. Jeremy, let's talk a little bit about the sound design.
Yeah.
There's a couple car chase scenes in this film,
Oh, yeah.
and the cars do things that obviously real cars cannot do.
Mhm.
But you have to take the sound of real cars and make them do these things. How do you approach it when the animated car does something just not possible in the real world? How do you find the sounds for that?
I think about the times in my youth that I thought were wasted. It turns out that they were incredibly valuable. I mean, doing weird voices or slowing down and speeding up my mom's answering machine, trying to make lower pitch or higher pitch chipmunk sounds, or in this case, playing with Matchbox cars. I was always doing, vocalizations of what I wanted the RPMs and the screeches of the tires to sound like as I was a kid, and I was very excited and interested in the idea of how the physics of the cars, basically played differently with different powerful engines or engines that weren't as powerful. I remember thinking about that as I was a kid. So that sort of exaggeration really translates well into the animated world, because we do want a sense that it's grounded in what we know. And we know what a car sounds like, but we're always asking ourselves, how can we push it farther? How can we make it more dramatic, like a Bond film? Or how can we make it hilarious? On the hilarious or even the action side, a lot of that kind of sequential, powerful or comic timing was based on things like watching old Warner Brothers or Disney cartoons.
Wow.
So a lot of the rhythm is based on that. How far can we push, things like pitch exaggeration or things like that is based on a little kid playing on the carpet with Matchbox cars. And kudos to the rest of our team. As we cut these sounds, we're really listening to what's happening with the music. And even if it's a temp track, we assume that's going to be representative of what generally the energy behind the music. So we're always kind of very aware of masking issues, and also when we're just getting in the way and when we want to exaggerate or duck out of different parts of the spectrum. One moment that was really fun was the hog rod.
Yes.
There was a lot of talk with Jared about how we're going to make this car derivative of a pig. This is a pig who is very excited to buy this hot rod that sounds like a hog. So we called it the hog rod, as I remember. And so there was a lot of experimenting of when we could lean into the animalistic side and when we could lean into the, powerful high RPM side. And we definitely found that with idling, quite often that was much more of a derivative of big guttural kind of chuggy pig recordings that were either put into a sampler or were carefully stitched together in certain ways. Then when it was a higher RPM, quite often it became a very intense Chevy going, 110 miles per hour.
Especially when the nitrous went in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All bets were off by that point. Speaking of our team, I want to make sure I give a shout out to Luke Dunn, Joel Robbie, Kim Patrick, Cameron Barker on our effects team. They just did an amazing job. Also our Foley walkers, Ronnie Brown and Sean England. Really, in the editorial side, the person who kept it all together was Andre Lynn, our first assistant. Andre's amazing. And of course, David already mentioned Brad Semenoff, who's a great friend of both David's and mine, but he's just such a talented, great guy.
The thing about Brad is he has to interface directly with the actors many times too, and the directors on a ADR stage, because people say, "Well, isn't dialogue all ADR?" It's all ADR. Well, it's not. We get production from all over the world, sometimes in a closet or in a hallway or in unpleasant environments because we need the actor. We either have to clean it up using traditional methods or ADR it. And the ability to interface and have people be comfortable and get what you need and just create that vibe, which, as you know, as a mixer and an editor, that's super important on the stage. The people skills, super important.
Pretty valued.
And, another thing I want to say about Jeremy and his work is, we have a lot of license to bring our own flavor to things. And that's the beauty of the experimentation. So, and a lot of times, as you know, in a film, a sound that is real doesn't sound right in the movie, and it for whatever psychological reason you could get into. But the beauty of this stuff is every single scene that you listen to is crafted in a way that it's just very artistic, but it's smart. And I'm always, you should have heard the pre-dubs. It's basically the old story that we heard for years and years, because it is a great thing. When I was a kid, and working with bearskins and stone knives, it was the BBC sound effects library on records.
Right.
And I'd make these cassette recordings of the Titanic sinking with a giant glass break hitting the iceberg and, changing the record. And thinking that way, like a kid is many times really helpful.
It's funny how we go through our professional life trying to be presentable, trying to make sure that we instill confidence, all that sort of stuff. But the truth is at our most successful, we end up kind of going back to a childlike state. And I think it's also the same with just filmmaking in general. We start out as audience members and we're fans, and then we learn parts of the art and the craft of what we do. As we do that, it's almost like an instrument where it needs to become inherent in who we are, because in reality, we're trying to get back to becoming audience members. It's funny how both of those things are very kind of full circle.
And it is great to see the film with an audience. That is one thing that we get to do. We do a couple of previews for an older audience and a younger audience, and we just put our toe in the water, see how it feels. And when you see people jumping up and down and happy, laughing, going with it, that's success, and you just keep trying to fine tune that and make things less confusing. And sound can really help with a lot of those things in terms of directing an audience to what to pay attention to, help along the way.
It's funny. I feel like Zootopia 2 was such a great film that even though each of us had seen it hundreds of times, we were still laughing.
Right.
There were still moments when we laughed. So we knew that it was a great film, and we knew that it was a great film even, as David said, when we watched it before it was properly animated. But you're right. There is nothing like sitting down with an audience, because they still laugh during all the moments that we laugh at. But there's some really nice surprises and reactions, when you watch it with an audience.
I watched it yesterday, believe it or not. I had to QC a DCP here. But we do, a full theatrical, Atmos 7151, IMAX 12 and 5, and all the home formats.
Right.
But to see the 3D was also super fun. And there was all these other formats that got released in too around the world that I don't even remember the names of, Screen X or something, and a bunch of things. So the world wanted it. And to watch it yesterday, and I was just sitting there, I forget how long. It's not super short. And I just laughed my way through it, and that's a good sign, right?
Yeah,
a little biased, but
yeah, you're a little biased.
But I know what you mean. There is a point where you step away from it for a while, and then you come back as, in a way, less of part of the sound team and more of an audience member, and you think, oh, it works,
right?
Yeah.
A while since I'd seen it, and I was like engaged.
It's so great, yeah.
One of the moments that really made me laugh out loud was when they're on the boat in the swamp, the police catch up to them, and Danny Trejo's character comes and gives them a very important speech and then runs across the water going, yeah, that was very funny. Yeah. I wanted, maybe, David, if you could talk about the idea of mixing a voice like Danny Trejo's, where that is just all throat and no actual vocal cords.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that?
First time hearing it, it's like, wait a minute, check. Is there a patch cord out or something? It is different. It's very different. But, I don't use a lot of esoteric plugins or things. I try to use the KISS principle, because I tell myself, keep it simple, stupid. I use what I need. And I have Q4, I have a de-esser, multi-band compressor I use. That's a go-to, because high-end in screaming voices, or like, for instance, in Shakira's voice in the song, when you get it up to those levels, you just got to be guarding against that stuff. And Danny had this very unusual range, and it just took a little tightening and a little bit of compression to kind of get him so that we could understand it, because sometimes the performances are great, but they might get thrown away a little bit. We try to help dialogue quite a lot. You don't want people going, what'd he say? Because then they're out of the movie, right? And that's a big topic these days too, is intelligibility. So
Hmm.
most of the time I'm not fighting, airplanes and trains and cars and things sometimes, but it allows me to really dial in what's needed. I use a lot of internal clip gain to detail most every word. They give me a good amount of time. We mixed the movie over the course of about 45 days on the final, 6 to 8 days for a dialogue pre-dub with this many characters. And I'll use every second of it because it's detailing the words that I love to do. It's people sometimes throw away the ends of their words, and we might know what they're saying, but an audience for the first time might not get it, and they might lose an inflection or something funny even or whatever. So I'm constantly getting in and not changing the performance unless we're asked to. And that's why working with Brad also, we can take pieces of other words. There was some detailing that we did with Danny's voice, the first consonants, to give it detail so that we could make sure. So we would replace others of his, just put in and give it clarity along the way. And we do that for almost each one of the characters had their own, Jason Bateman is so easygoing, but he's got to be kept up a little bit, especially with all the action or things going on. But they're all such great actors that it didn't require reinventing anything, just kind of helping it along, because when you get everything else in there, and then also when you can step back, you're able to play things in the scene a little bit. Clarity is really important. Creating the spaces for all the different locations, that's a fun thing to do with dialogue, especially with an animated film, because you're not strapped in generally with predetermined reverbs and treatments on the voice already. So there were a lot of opportunities to create, like on the wall of the canyon when they're climbing.
That was a scene that stuck out for me, for sure.
Yeah, there was a front and a back and an overhead, just different delays, but that's the kind of thing that can be overdone really easily. Reverb in general, it's the one thing a director will say, "What's that? Never heard that before." And it all goes away if you're not careful, so kind of careful to give myself room in a pre-dub to play it up a little bit, but then when it comes to final, I'm able to dial it in and nobody gets shocked. At least you try not to.
No one got shocked, I can promise you. It was great.
Oh, thank you. It was fun.
We only have time for one more question, and I thought maybe we could dig into one other scene that I thought was done really well. All the scenes are done really well, but the scene after they go up the cliff that you just mentioned, when the house starts falling apart, and it's actually quite a long scene of this house slowly ripping apart. It's all wood sounds, so it's creaking and it's splintering. Again, huge music. And this time, unlike the underwater scene, there's dialogue through it all. Mm-hmm. Jeremy, do you want to talk about designing the sound of all that wood being ripped apart?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had a lot of great guidance from our two directors, but also Jeremy Milton, our picture editor. There were some great kind of timing hints that were in there. The kind of sequence of the deep groans and kind of setting the creepy environment, those were hinted at there. So we took his ideas and we ran with it. And, per usual, a lot of it is just down to really listening to what's happening in the other two guide tracks as far as what's happening with dialogue, what's happening with music, really kind of thinking about it as instrumentation of percussion and sustains, and thinking about we're either building up to a moment or we're getting out of a moment, and where we want the climaxes of different points in time. So it was really, let's hit this point and get out of it. Let's hit this other point and get out of it, to make sure that we leave, enough room in the sandbox. The goal is to make sure that we don't create anything that would qualify as noise. Everything has a point and an intent and an emotional core. Below the emotion is the story points. And beyond that, really, our mixers deserve all the credit. Both Gabe and David really crafted that scene to kind of bob and weave between all of the elements. And I was really so happy that the dialogue, the music, and the effects all seem powerful, like they are when great mixers tackle a scene like that. You're not really aware of what's happening. It's really a sleight of hand. And I think that scene is a great example of that kind of constant sequence of magic tricks that's happening on the console.
We're doing our job if nobody notices, right?
Exactly.
There you go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That house was so much fun because of the different locations, the wood room treatments, even on the dialogue. And
So great.
Gabe and I get to match our rooms, for Foley and dialogue, so we don't sound like two different spaces all the time. So we're constantly communicating that stuff. And the one thing about that scene is the dynamics, which we get in there and then it's super quiet. Something's coming. The creature's outside the door, right? But you just don't know when.
Oh, that anticipation.
And then all of a sudden he falls to the floor.
Yeah.
Well, it's the anticipation, not the thing, that makes it great. One of the other things I want to point out, because we've been talking a little bit about the music, is another collaborator, Warren Brown, our scoring mixer. We just sat down and conferred for a long time, again, before we even started, before they recorded anything, and collaborated on layouts and who was going to do what and why. And we got it. We got what we needed. And Chiquino was like, here's this thing, do what you will with it. And he came, he was present a lot. And what an amazing, both those guys. But one of the things that we get to do early on is a score temp, where I'll finish the dialogue pre-dub, effects are still being worked on, but at that point, the score has been recorded and mostly mixed. I might get board mixes that are like the real thing, but, just 5/1 scratch mixes. I will go through for about a week and just lay it in as a rough, mix. Not so much about the mix, but it's about the content. So before we even start the final, we're watching the movie with the final score.
Wow.
It's a real luxury, to be honest, because then we're like, oh, well, we can take the music out here, or maybe we need to go back and redo this cue for tension, or maybe you can do some enhancement here. I mean, it's all about notes to make sure we don't get to the end when we're up against the delivery, which we are.
Yeah.
There might be some creative decisions that get made earlier, so then we don't run into that as much as we go forward. And that's a great thing to do with the real stuff, so that everybody can get used to what the direction everybody's headed. And that Jeremy and I are able to, we're seeing what's in there now for real. And before we start the mix, we know, and there'll be modifications made. That's a big deal too, for making it all work.
I think that's one of the great parts about, the culture of Disney animation, is that sort of proactive spirit is applied across many facets of what we do. I can't emphasize how incredibly busy everyone, especially our directors and our picture editor, were. And they took the time to really listen to the sequences that they were most interested in on the sound effects side too. Mm-hmm. All the elements were coming together, and they had heard the majority of it. And, obviously we're putting it together, and David and Gabe are bobbing and weaving with their mixing console, but we knew the ingredients.
He's weaving, I'm bobbing.
Where's the pun jar?
Sorry, not sorry.
But yeah, it's great how interested they are about early parts of the process, and that is really not taken for granted, and it's so appreciated.
Well, it's just super efficient. There's much less surprises.
Right.
To be honest, it's not cheap making these movies and putting it all together. And so we're trying to be as efficient as we can be and still leave as much room for the creative part that needs to be done. We hope that it's on the screen.
Well, and that's another great thing about the fact that, all of that has been heard and seen so early is it isn't limiting.
Right.
People will still have ideas of things to try in the mix stage, and really exciting, powerful things are still happening then. So
what if?
Pretty fun.
What if we...
Yeah.
Thank you very much for talking to me today. This was really good. A couple of your answers really made me happy, especially your answer, Jeremy, about using Matchbox cars and bringing that all the way up to your future. I can relate to that in so many ways. So I've never actually articulated it like that before, though.
That's awesome.
So it made me very happy. And David, it was lovely to meet you. And hopefully we get to talk all again sometime soon.
Likewise.
Good luck with the awards season, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for the time.
Big thanks to David and Jeremy for that talk. Next week's episode is with the sound team from One Battle After Another. This is one of my favorite films of the last year. It is a talk you will definitely want to make sure you hear. If you've not seen One Battle After Another yet, check it out ASAP. If you want to cheer on the best sound work done over the last year, including today's guest, Jeremy Boker, who is double nominated this year, Get your tickets now for the Motion Picture Sound Editors Golden Reel Awards taking place on March 8th. The awards start at 3 p.m. at the Wilshire E. Bell Theater in Los Angeles. Legendary producer Kathleen Kennedy will be getting the Filmmaker Award, and this past year's best-sounding films will be represented by the amazing sound artists that brought them to life. Patton Oswalt will be hosting, and dinner will be after the awards are given out. Tickets can be purchased now until February 25th by going to mpse.org. And remember, Motion Picture Sound Editor members get a sweet $150 off their ticket price. If you are planning to be in Los Angeles for the awards, consider coming a few days early on Thursday, March 5th, to go to the 4th annual Tonebenders LA Sound Design Meetup, sponsored by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. This is a great night where you can hang out with old friends and colleagues and meet a bunch of new ones. Everybody that works in sound for movies, series, and games is welcome and encouraged to come. Last year, we kind of outgrew the previous venue, and we've now moved it to all-season brewing this year. I hope you can make it. It was a lot of fun last year, even though we were packed in pretty tight. This year should be even better with a bit of elbow room. Please feel free to tell anyone you think might be interested in coming out. If you work in sound design, post, or game audio, you already know how much time the right library can save you. For the month of February, get 50% off any Sound Ideas membership tier, no matter which level of access you need. That's half off of the entire professionally recorded sound effects catalog, from cinematic and broadcast to hard-to-find specialty sounds. Just head to sound-ideas.com and use the promo code TONEBENDERS50 at checkout. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues. Or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.